Okay, good afternoon and welcome to Critical Thinking Through English Composition. I'll quickly take attendance and then we'll get started. Chae Sung Woo. Okay. Kim Sung Jun.
Yep.
Kim Sung Jun is here. Yang Sung Hyun.
Here.
Great. And Lee Yong Jun.
Yes.
Okay. And Kim Ji Sol. Okay. Kwon Se Chin.
Here.
Okay, it's here. And Oh Jung No.
I'm here.
Okay, great. Jinny. Woo Ji Won. No. Okay. Vu Chi Tan.
Yes, I'm here.
Okay. And Jung Jia.
I'm here, Professor.
Okay, great. And Hyun Ju.
Yes, I'm here.
Great. Lee Soo Min. Kim Hyo Jin.
I'm here.
Okay. And Min Tu Cha. No. Okay. Iris.
I'm here.
Okay. Jack.
I'm here.
Okay. And Fan Kwang An.
I'm here.
Okay. And Joseph.
Here.
Okay. Joseph, just to confirm, because I noticed your ID there says Kaylan. Do you want me to call you Keelan or Joseph? Which would you prefer?
It doesn't matter, up to you.
Okay. And Yo Hyo-min.
Here.
Okay, good. And then after that, Sijda Yunur.
I'm here.
Okay. And Kim Tae-woo.
Present.
Okay. And Shin Chae-young.
I'm here.
Great. And Jo Sun-young.
I'm here.
Okay. And Kia Kanerva.
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, great. And Alice.
Yes, I'm present.
Okay. And Hugo.
Yes, good afternoon.
Okay, great. All right. Well, I've got a question for everybody. I'll address this question to Alice for no particular reason, but just I'll ask Alice. You know, one thing that has always interested me since I was a small boy was the idea that we might not be alone in the universe. Maybe somewhere out there on a distant planet, there could be aliens that are intelligent and might one day visit our planet and say hello. Watched a lot of old science fiction movies about aliens coming to our world. And I've seen some interesting movies about colonizing space. If you haven't seen the 1990 Arnold Schwarzenegger movie, Total Recall, you should, it's great. But I want to ask you, do you think there is life on other planets?
Well, I'm not sure.
Oh, nobody's sure. Unless you can say that.
Yeah, personally, I don't think so,
Okay.
but there might be.
Okay, but you would say probably not.
Yes, I would say probably not.
You're a skeptic. Okay. Hyunju, what do you think? Are we alone? in the
Oh,
universe?
well, I also don't know about it, but there's a word that if you just, I don't know, if you when you go to the sea and there, if you cannot see any fish there, but it does not mean that there is no fish in the whole world, right? So maybe, yeah, I just think that it's just my opinion, but I really think that might be somewhere, other planet, there can be some, yeah, some different kinds of the creature, something like that.
Okay.
I don't know.
Now, I want, before I ask somebody else, I want to stay with what you said there. You actually brought up a certain type of logical argument there. You said if you go to the sea and you look around, just because you don't see fish doesn't mean that there aren't any fish in the ocean. It just means that you can't see the fish, right? Okay, this is commonly termed as absence of evidence is not evidence of absence, meaning, there you go, yeah, absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. Just because you can't see something does not necessarily mean it's not there, it just means that it's not visible. Okay. However, that does not mean that something is there. It just means that just because there is no evidence that is obviously present, doesn't mean that there isn't something there. Young Seung-hyun, do you think that there could be life on other planets?
I think it's possible, highly possible.
Okay, so we're moving from probably no to maybe to, okay, student by student, we're getting closer. We're getting closer. All right, now let's say I wanted you to convince Alice. Alice said that, now I don't want to put words in Alice's mouth. Alice did not say that there aren't creatures or aliens living on other planets. She just said it's not likely. She's skeptical. She thinks there's probably not any life on other planets. We haven't seen any evidence, any clear evidence yet. But you say there probably is. Okay. Change her mind. What could be an argument for life on other planets?
I think that the galaxy is very big, it's vast, so we just haven't found it yet, I guess. Yeah.
Okay, so you've got two things there. First of all, the size of the galaxy. Galaxy is very, very big, and there are many stars, and some of these stars are really big. So planets go around them. You know, the biggest star in our solar system is the sun. But your second one is very similar to the absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. There's a lot out there. This is what some people call the marble argument. If you have a big bag of marbles, there's probably one of them that's blue. Maybe. What you said there, the universe is big, that is what is called a premise. There is probably life on other planets. That's your conclusion. And that's what we're going to be looking at today. For homework, I asked you to read chapter 1, which is some general rules for arguments. And we're going to be looking at this in today's class and also next class. Before we get deeply into arguments, we have to understand the basics. Any argument is usually composed of two things. A series of premises, which are the reasons for something, and then there's the conclusion. This is what you're trying to argue, right? In this case, that there's probably life on other planets. Okay, I'll give you a second example. Who am I gonna pick on here? Who have I not talked to for a while? Taewook, okay, I'll choose you. Would it be better if professors did not give grades for assignments? So no A's or B's or anything like that.
I don't think so.
Okay, so you think assignments should have grades?
I think it compels students to work harder than, say, if there were no grades.
Okay. So assignments should have grades. That would be your conclusion. And one of the reasons for that is, well, the presence of grades, or the hope to get a good grade. This makes students work harder. If students didn't have to worry about grades, well, they might not try hard. If you don't have to get an A, what's the point in trying? All right, these are some pretty interesting ideas. Today, I want to spend the first 10 minutes or so taking a look at a couple of different general rules for arguments, especially looking at the difference between premises and conclusions. Also, putting your argument into a natural order. And we're going to be doing some interesting exercises as well. So without further ado, let's get into some, oh, by the way, very quickly, Sijtekov Yunur, I just noticed you down there. Did you have the galaxy in the background before I talked about life on other planets?
Yes.
You did? Oh, okay, so it's just a coincidence then. Okay, I wondered if you changed that because of my question. Okay, let's get started. So here we are. Let's move on to our third class, and let's take a look at a couple of general rules for making arguments. These are, I want to take a look at each of these in turn. These were developed in the chapter which I asked you to read for homework. If you're going to analyze somebody else's argument, or you're going to make your own argument, here are some rules that you should be aware of. Number one, you should resolve your premises and conclusion. Make sure they're clearly distinguished. Number two, unfold your ideas in a natural order. This is very important because otherwise people sometimes cannot easily distinguish what your premises are and what your conclusion is. Also, some orders are much more effective than others. It can be very confusing if it's not well ordered. Rule number three, start from reliable premises. Number four, be concrete and concise. Number five, build on substance. And number six, use consistent terms. We're not going to look at all of these today, however. So first, though, let's take a look at the first one. Resolve the premises and conclusion. You know, what are you trying to prove, or what is the other person trying to prove? When you listen to an argument, the first thing you want to do is try and figure out what the person is trying to prove. This is not always easy because some people do not word their premises and conclusion very well. They don't explain very well. Not everybody has studied essay structure or critical thinking. So there are reasons why people don't always put their arguments in the best possible explanation. Also, it's very important to have premises. Oh, I'm getting ahead of myself. It's very important to have premises that are clearly related to your conclusion. It's also important that you don't assume people already know your reasons. Some people might be very familiar with whatever topic you're discussing, other people might not. So what am I talking about? When you put together an argument, it's very important to resolve your premises and conclusion. And by resolve, I mean two things. Number one, distinguish. We should very clearly be able to distinguish what your conclusion is from the reasons why we should believe that conclusion. Also, resolve means commit to. So if you can't commit to both, then you should change one. If one of your premises does not match the conclusion, then either you change the conclusion or you change the premises. Now, if you are listening to someone's argument, or you are writing your own argument for a writing assignment or a debate or some kind of presentation, there are certain words that you can use to indicate that you are either talking about your premise or talking about your conclusion. If you are listing your premises, you might use words like because, since, or given that, or following. The textbook has a number of different examples of indicator words for premises. When you give your conclusion, you could use words like therefore, so, and consequently. By the way, you will notice I put a comma after each of those. Therefore, comma, so, comma, consequently, comma. When you give your conclusion, please remember the comma. It's one of those things that I pay special attention to. Now, if you read the first chapter for homework, you're probably familiar with the example which the author gave. And that was, we should eat more beans. Reminds me of the old song from elementary school. Beans, beans, the magical fruit. The more you eat, the more you toot. I don't know why that came into my mind. Okay, now the writer gives two basic premises for why we should eat more beans. First of all, the writer says that beans are healthy, they're very high in fiber, and they're also high in protein. Besides that, eating beans could lead to a longer, healthier life. So in conclusion, you should eat more beans. Now that seems fairly straightforward. We have a conclusion, we should eat more beans, and there are two reasons for that conclusion. Proof or evidence, something to convince us that this conclusion is worthwhile. Beans are healthy, and eating more beans could lead to a much better life and greater longevity. However, let's take a look at a couple other examples. Now, just a moment ago, I asked Taewook about whether students should get grades or not. Here's an argument. Professors shouldn't give students grades on their assignments because grades give bad incentives and they don't provide useful feedback. Okay, I'm not saying I agree with this argument, but let's take a look at it for a moment. I'm going to go back to Taewook. Right? Taewook, when you look at this argument, can you distinguish the premises from the conclusion? What is the conclusion of this argument?
Professors shouldn't give students grades on their assignments, and the premise is because grades give bad incentives and don't provide useful feedback.
Okay, now I'm not going to say that I agree with these premises 100%, although I will admit that when I was in university, I sometimes had a dilemma between writing what I thought and writing what I thought the professor wanted to hear. And this is one of the arguments against giving letter grades. You're actually just encouraging the students to try and please the professor, not necessarily develop their own thinking skills. But yeah, this is the argument. Professors shouldn't give students grades on their assignments. That's the conclusion, because grades give bad incentives and they don't provide useful feedback. In this case, the conclusion is stated first and the premises come after. Okay, I feel like I should have some mysterious music in the background. The head of the spy organization is very dangerous. He is also exceptionally clever and a master of disguise. He has 12 names and 100 different appearances. But there's one thing he cannot disguise. He is missing the tip of his little finger. So if you ever meet a man who is missing the top joint of his little finger, you should be very careful. Okay, Kia. This is from an old movie, actually. I think it's an old Alfred Hitchcock movie. Looking at this, can you distinguish the premises from the conclusion?
Well, the conclusion in this, I think, is that if you ever meet a man that is missing like the top joint of his pinky finger, you should be careful.
That's right.
And the premises are, well, I mean, he's very dangerous and clever and blah blah blah. So
yeah.
that's why you should be careful.
That's right. Now, I just want to point out that not every single piece of information in this quote is part of the argument. This is one of the reasons why it's important to, we say, resolve the premise and the conclusion. If you're ever confused, just think to yourself, is this particular sentence the argument itself? Is this what they're trying to convince me? Or is it a reason why I should believe that conclusion? If it's one of those two, then it's part of the argument. And if it's not, then it's not. In this case, yeah, the main premise is the head of the spy organization is very dangerous. So and then the conclusion, if you ever, and then, yeah, he has he's missing the tip of his little finger. That's very important, very important premise, because if you ever meet a man who's missing the top joint of his little finger, you should be very careful in this case, because he could be the head of a spy organization. Here's another one. People are created equal and born with unalienable rights. Governments exist to protect those rights. When a government violates those rights, people have a right to rebel against that government and create a new one. The King of Great Britain has repeatedly violated the rights of the American colonists. Thus, the American colonists have a right to rebel against the King of Great Britain. In this case, the conclusion is the American colonists have a right to rebel against the King of Britain. And the first part of this argument lists a number of premises, very closely related premises, that explain why the American colonists have a right to rebel. People are created equal, they're born with rights, and the purpose of government is to protect those rights. When governments violate those rights, then people actually have a duty to rebel against that government. This one might be my personal favorite. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau looks suspiciously like former Cuban leader Fidel Castro. Trudeau's parents traveled to Cuba, I can't say this without laughing, many times and met with Castro, and there are pictures of Trudeau's mother looking fondly at Castro. Is it too far-fetched to believe that Fidel Castro is Justin Trudeau's real father? If you're interested to see what the two look like, there they are. If you think that they look similar enough to be father and son, feel free to do some searching online. It's an interesting conspiracy theory. But let's take a look at this for a moment. I'm going to ask Guan Seijin, what is the conclusion of this argument?
The conclusion is that a lot of people say that Justin Trudeau, the Prime Minister of Canada, is the son of Castro.
So yeah, Justin Trudeau's real father might be former Cuban leader Fidel Castro. Yeah, Fidel Castro might be Justin Trudeau's real father. That's the conclusion. Might be. It's not stating it. Right. Yeah, might be.
Possibility.
Yeah, it's a possibility. Yeah. And what are some premises here?
It's that Trudeau's parents traveled to Cuba, and there are pictures of his mother looking fondly at Castro.
Yeah, looking fondly. Now, what you can obviously do with an argument like this, you might remember one of the general rules for premises is you should start from reliable premises. And one thing we're going to look at a little bit later today and also next class is what are reliable premises? What are statements of fact and what are statements that actually might not be true or are quite likely untrue or simply misleading. As for regarding Justin Trudeau's true parentage, I will leave that up to you if you're interested in the subject. Okay, and here is a fifth example. The only remaining question was why the man had been murdered. This is from Sherlock Holmes, I think. The only remaining question was why the man had been murdered. Was it a politically motivated crime or a private one? I thought right away that it must be a privately motivated crime. Political assassins move quickly and flee. But in this case, the murderer's footprints are all over the room, showing that he had spent quite a while in this room. Okay, I'll give this one to Yosef. So what is the conclusion here?
That has been some murder.
Well, there has been a murder. That's
And,
for sure. There's a dead person on the there's a dead
And there
person
are
on the
hints
floor.
all over the room.
But yeah, what about the murder?
Political crime or private one?
Okay, well, those are the two options. It's either a political crime or a private crime. What
Yeah.
does Sherlock Holmes think?
Private motivated one.
That's right. I just want to point out here, the conclusion in this example comes in the middle of the argument. If you look at all 5 examples here, sometimes the conclusion comes at the beginning, sometimes the conclusion comes at the end, sometimes the conclusion comes in the middle. There is no, one place where you have to put your conclusion. Depending on your argument and your style and how you want to arrange the information, a conclusion can be almost anywhere in the argument. But let's take a look at this one. Yeah, he says, I thought right away it must be a privately motivated crime. Okay, so that's his argument. This murder is not political, it's private. What evidence does he give? What are the premises for this conclusion?
That the political ones are fast and they flee quickly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, political assassins usually move quickly and flee. They kill the person and they run away. But
The murder was slow, I guess. There were footprints and he spent a quiet while in the room.
that's right. It looks like the murderer killed someone and then walked around. The footprints were all over. So they didn't follow the pattern of a typical political assassination. So from that, the detective deduces that this is probably a private crime. So in this case, that's the conclusion. By the way, this type of argument, this is a form of deductive argument. We'll be looking at this later in the course. I think the technical term is a hypothetical syllogism. I might be mispronouncing that. And you will recognize its structure very quickly if you have ever watched a detective program or Sherlock Holmes or any other sort of whodunit movie. That kind of deduction will become very, very obvious a little bit later in the class. Okay, next, unfold your ideas in natural order. Okay, so you know what your premises are, you know what your conclusion is. How should you present them? In what order would be the best way to give us this information and then convince us that you are correct? Well, let's take a look at the example that the book gave in chapter 1. This is the eating beans is great. We should eat more beans. Well, let's put this together. We should eat more beans. One reason is that beans are healthy. They are higher in fibers and protein, and they're lower in fat and cholesterol than what most people know. Furthermore, bean dishes can be quite varied and exciting. Think of spicy black bean taco fillings or hummus. Okay, now this argument starts by stating the conclusion. We get the conclusion at the very beginning, then we get the first premise and a reason, then we get the second premise and some examples. You could rearrange the sequence a little bit, like you could put the bean dishes can be quite varied and exciting. That could be the first premise rather than the second. It wouldn't really matter. But it is a good thing that they put the conclusion in the beginning in this case, because imagine the writer mixed it up and it looked like this. Think of spicy black bean taco fillings or hummus. Beans are higher in fibers and protein and lower in fat and cholesterol than what most people know. Bean dishes can be quite varied and exciting. We should eat more beans. Beans are healthy. It's the same information, but it's in a different order. There's also no transition words or signposting. We don't have first or second. The information is all there, but the argument is not very clear. Well, what I would like you to do in just a moment is take a look at this particular argument. What I've done is I've mixed up the order. I would like you to not only identify the premise and conclusion, but also add some indicator words. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to stop that just for a moment. Now I can see everybody there. Oh, it's so great when I stop sharing the screen. And I'm going to go back over here. And just a moment. If you go to, let me just go over here. If you go to Cyber Campus announcements, class 3, you'll find a file which I uploaded just a little while ago. Let me bring this up and I'll actually show you what it looks like here. I've taken this interesting argument about genetically modified fish and I've scrambled it up. So let me just bring this up and I'll show you what I've got. There we go. Okay. If genetically modified salmon escaped into the wild, they would compete with natural salmon for food. Genetically modified salmon are not designed to flourish in the wild. Some companies are creating genetically modified animals, such as salmon, that provide more meat for customers. Natural salmon, though, have been honed by natural selection to flourish in the wild. Non-genetically modified salmon would outcompete genetically modified salmon if genetically modified salmon escaped into the wild. Okay, now this argument, as you can see, is not only mixed up, but there are no indicator words. There's no transition words either. There's no signposting. Just by looking at this text, I would like you and your partners to try and distinguish what the argument is. what are the premises? And what is the conclusion that the writer wants to prove? I'll put you in groups for about 5 minutes, and I'd like you to try and distinguish between the premises and the conclusion. What is this person trying to prove? And what are the ideas that they use to try and prove that conclusion? When I ask you to do it, you might want to add an indicator word there too. So yeah, if you'd like to get this, just go to Cyber Campus announcements class 3, and you should be able to find that there. Okay, I'll give you about 5 minutes or so. The doors are open. Let's see what you and your partners can come up with.
Maybe not, because we have like dough then, so it doesn't really fit actually.
So I guess I just looked it up right now, and like the indicator words are something like since, because, for, the things that Mr. Barnard actually told us about the examples for premises.
Mm.
Oh, hi, everyone.
So
Right. So what is this person writing about? What is the subject?
it's that non-genetically modified salmon can't really compete with the wild ones.
Mhm.
I think that's the conclusion.
That's right, yeah. If genetically modified fish escape into the wild, they will not compete successfully with natural salmon.
Right.
Yeah, this argument, I think, wants to calm people down because some people are very worried about genetically modified fish or genetically modified animals. And one argument is if they escape into the wild, they will, take over the ecosystem. There could be great damage. By the way, I'm not saying I agree with the argument in this example. I'm only saying this is the example from the book.
Right.
I am actually a little bit worried about exactly this kind of thing when genetically modified food or animals does escape a controlled environment and goes into a natural ecosystem. Okay, I'm gonna keep quiet. Okay, I'll give you guys another minute or two. Great.
It's like, give some, for instance. Yes, it's like give an example of the bad situation. If the modified salmon escape in the wild, this will be happen. Yeah, so
Genetically modified salmon, I'm not.
bad situation. If the modified salmon escape in the wild, this will be happen. Yeah, so
maybe it's not
Modified salmon and not. Oh. Recording in progress. Okay.
Okay, the question is: everything in this paragraph part of the argument? I think this is something I might have skipped accidentally in my earlier part of the presentation.
Me personally, I think the third sentence doesn't belong in the.
Okay, what is the third sentence?
Some companies are creating genetically modified animals, such as salmon, that provide more meat for the customers.
That's right. Yeah, this is not a premise and it's not a conclusion. What is it?
An example?
It's not an example. I'm looking at some
support for the previous sentence, like the genetically modified salmon are not designed to flourish in the wild because it just provide more meat for customers.
Right. So what this is trying to do is just give a little bit of context. It's not a premise on which the argument is based. It's not a conclusion. It's just giving a little bit of context or background information. And context and background information is not the same as a premise. A premise would be a reason to believe the conclusion. In this case, when people give an argument, they will often begin by saying something about the topic, introducing it in some way, before they get to the premise or the premises or their conclusion. they want to give a little bit of background so people know what they're talking about. In this case, the writer talks about genetically modified salmon. In this case, some companies produce it, and people are worried what happens when genetically modified animals, for example, genetically modified salmon, what happens if they escape from a controlled environment, like a fish farm, into the wild, into the ocean. Now, the writer of this wants to argue that there is danger or there is not danger. I'll listen to Jack. What is the writer trying to argue? Is there a danger or not?
It's danger.
Danger? You had a 50-50 chance there. I'm going to give Hugo the second chance. Is the writer trying to argue there is something we should worry about or not?
I think what the person wants to say here is that it's not that problematic because they won't be able to replace, I mean, genetically modified salmon won't be able to take the place of natural salmon because they just cannot really compete in the wide environments with their natural counterparts.
Yeah, that's correct. According to this argument, and by the way, I do not necessarily agree with the premises or conclusion here. I'm actually a little bit worried about some genetically modified organisms, but according to this article, or according to this argument, yeah, Hugo, you are correct. Genetically modified salmon are not, they did not evolve in the wild. So therefore they cannot compete with natural fish. And if a genetically modified salmon does escape into the ocean, into the wider ecosystem, it will die. It will not successfully compete with natural salmon because it hasn't evolved that way. Now, this is an interesting argument. We've probably heard both sides of this argument. Some people are very worried about genetically modified organisms escaping into the wild. This argument says it's not something to worry about. Let's go back to the main screen and see if everybody's got that. Okay.
Thank you.
Oh, by the way, just very quickly for Hugo, did you think we had on-campus classes last time? I think
I first thought so, and yeah, I didn't attend the course 2 days ago. Yeah, the thing is, to be honest, it's my first year here using Cyber Campus, and during another online courses, the teacher posts different Zoom meeting session for every lesson. So yeah, I first thought it wouldn't be possible, but
okay, no, yeah, sorry for any misunderstanding. Yeah, for us, we will be using the Zoom link for each, the same Zoom link for each time. Yeah.
That's what I thought after this. Yeah.
And when we go on campus, I'll be putting messages to remind everybody. I know how confusing it can be when you first come to a new country and you're getting used to a new university system, and sometimes there are language difficulties too. So if you do have Sogang Tok Tok on your phone, right?
Sogang what? Excuse me.
It's called Sogang Tok Tok. I'll just, if you don't have it on your phone, it would be a very good idea to get it. It's TOK. It's a messaging platform for Sogang University students, and it's one way that I can communicate with all the students in the class. I can put messages on Cyber Campus, but people don't always check Cyber Campus. So the easiest thing for me to do is just put a message on, here we go, you can see that's what it looks like. And
okay, thank you.
yeah, go download the app. It's free and it's the best way to keep in touch. All right, so I'll see you on the main screen in just a moment. Okay, so let's see what we're doing. So Isumin, I'd like to ask you about salmon. So first of all, what is the conclusion of this writer?
Our group said that non-genetically modified salmon would outcompete genetically modified salmon if genetically modified salmon escaped into the wild.
Okay, yes, that's correct. The person is obviously trying to convince an audience that genetically modified fish are not a threat, not something to be worried about. There is no danger, even if genetically modified salmon escape from a fish farm or a controlled environment into the ocean. We don't have to worry because non-genetically modified fish will outcompete genetically modified fish. So the genetically modified fish will die in the ocean. They will not reproduce in great numbers, and they will not be a great harm to the environment. You might accept that argument, or you might want to argue against it. I know some people are very skeptical about genetically modified organisms, but that is what the writer is trying to claim. Yeah. The premise, what are the premises, Sumin? So why should we believe that genetically modified salmon are not a threat?
Because genetically modified salmons are not designed to flourish in the wild. Natural salmon, though, have been honed by natural selection to flourish in the wild. So even if genetically modified salmons escaped into the wild, they would compete with natural salmon for food. So we think these are the premises for the conclusion.
So because the genetically modified salmon did not evolve naturally in the wild, they will not be as successful in the wild. So we don't have to worry, according to the conclusion. Yeah, you are correct, although one of the great things about an argument is there are always at least two sides. And I've read some fairly strenuous arguments that would disagree with that writer, but I always like to hear the other side. Now, what I'd like you to, actually, we're already at 2:22. Should I bother going with the first one? I think I'll leave the second activity there. I might give that for homework, and then we might just check that at the beginning of our next class. Let me quickly go up here from the jigsaw. So skip that. Yeah, all right, yeah, the second activity there is a scrambled argument about how PowerPoint presentations are destroying higher education. And yes, I recognize the irony of posting that on my PowerPoint. Rule number 3, I mentioned this a little bit earlier. When you list your premises for your argument, you should start from reliable premises, trustworthy premises, premises that are at the very least true. Are they plausible? Do you need to do research? Some premises actually need a lot of evidence. Other premises don't really need a lot of evidence because they're common knowledge. Let's take a look at a couple of examples. Artificial intelligence will soon be able to run cities or even whole continents. Artificial intelligence has been advancing quickly in recent years, and one new artificial intelligence program, AlphaZero, can become an expert in complex games like chess and Go in a matter of hours after being taught nothing more than the basic rules. If AlphaZero can master complex games, then surely it won't be long before it can run or manage, govern cities or continents. Okay, I'm going to pick quite randomly here, Jo Sun-young. So first of all, let's take a look at the premises and the conclusion. What is the conclusion? Oh, stick a message here. I've got a problem with your microphone. Okay, let me choose someone else. Who has not talked about yet? Chae Sung-woo. Oh no, Sung-woo I think is not here today. Gabrielle. Okay, Gabrielle, what is the conclusion of this argument?
Artificial intelligence will soon be able to run cities or even whole continents.
Yeah, that's right. In particular, this specific artificial intelligence, AlphaZero. Yeah, AlphaZero will be able to run cities or continents very soon. That's a very, very big claim. What premises do they give?
So AlphaZero can become an expert in complex games like chess and Go. And so if AlphaZero can master complex games, then surely it won't be long until before it can run cities or continents.
Okay, now that's an interesting argument. Okay, you have a form of artificial intelligence, it's called AlphaZero. And according to this premise, I don't know if this is true, it can become an expert in complex games very quickly after being taught nothing more than the basic rules. Now, can you argue that a form of artificial intelligence that can become a game expert quickly can also very quickly learn to run parts of human civilization? Well, let's take a look at this premise, or these premises, and see how strong they are. The very first premise here, which is that artificial intelligence has been advancing quickly in recent years. I think that's fairly common knowledge. You don't really need a lot of evidence for that. But the second one here, you would need to give some kind of source. It says AlphaZero can become an expert in complex games like chess or Go. Well, where did you get that information? We shouldn't just accept that unless there is some kind of source. I want to check and see if AlphaZero really can become an expert. Is that actually true? The third premises, however, is probably unreliable because figuring out how to win at chess is very, very different from figuring out how to run a human society. Okay, let's take a look at the second one here. Despite what skeptics would have you believe, many people are capable of seeing ghosts. Ghosts are real, and anyone with the psychic ability known as extrasensory perception, or ESP, is capable of seeing them. ESP is a real phenomenon, according to Professor Joseph Rhine of Duke University. In fact, about half of all people have ESP, although many never realize it. Okay, I'm going to stop just here because I would like you and your partners to take a look at this argument. I want you to identify the premises and the conclusion. And I also want you to take a serious look at each of the premises. How reliable are they? Are they very reliable? For example, common knowledge, you don't really need any evidence to support it. Is a premise somewhat reliable? You know, maybe it's probably true, but you need some kind of source, maybe some research. And is there any premise that maybe is very unreliable, something which is likely to be factually untrue? Well, what I'll do is I'll very quickly just copy and paste that text into here for you. And I'd love, oh, what happened there? All right, there we go. Yeah, despite what skeptics would have you believe, many people are capable of seeing ghosts. He thrusts his fists against the posts and still insists he sees the ghosts. ESP. Okay, I'm going to mix up your groups this time. Variety is the spice of life. Okay, I'll give you and your partners about 5 or 6 minutes, and then I'd love to hear your opinions. First of all, what are the premises? Next, what's the conclusion? And going back to those premises, are there any premises that are reliable? Are there any premises that are somewhat reliable? And are there any premises that are completely unreliable? And why so? All right, let's get started.
He just posted. He posted the text on the chat.
No.
The conclusion is probably that people can see ghosts, are capable of seeing ghosts.
Agree. The first one.
The reliable or credible premise is like the fact that the professor from Duke University.
Just a quick question. What do you think? Oh my, I was green there for a second.
Yeah.
What do you think of the first premise? Ghosts are real.
Cap.
Says
How?
right there, ghosts are real. And then there's the second part. Anyone with the psychic ability known as extrasensory perception is capable of seeing them. Is that a reliable premises or not?
No.
Why not?
It's just there's no evidence.
No, okay, or no conclusive evidence. Let's say
There
yeah.
is a study, like
Okay.
a factual thing that actually supports it. I don't know.
Yeah, it is not. Yeah, it is not proven that there is life after death. Yeah, it is not. It is not a proven fact scientifically that there is life after death. There could be life after death. There could be ghosts, but you need a lot of evidence if you want to make that kind of claim.
Yeah.
Yeah. This premise is, number one, not only are ghosts real, but also ESP is also real. And not only is ESP also real, but most people have it. Those first two claims, those first two premises, ESP is real and ghosts are real. I wouldn't say those are very reliable. You would need a lot of evidence to try and back up those claims. And I don't think you could actually, you couldn't argue, you could try to prove the likelihood, but to prove it beyond a doubt, I don't see how that's possible.
And it says half of all people have ESP.
Half of all people have ESP. This is another problem with the premise. Half of the world's population have an ability that is not scientifically proven to exist. By the way, I'm not saying that ESP does not exist. I'm just saying it hasn't been proven yet.
I mean, it doesn't exist.
It could, yeah. Well,
Having an opinion is not something wrong.
and that actually is, you make a good point there, having an opinion. Because in this case, the person is not arguing for an opinion. The person is trying to argue the truth of a statement.
Yeah.
All right, okay.
I meant it as like, you keep saying, I do not agree with this, or like, I just like, I don't find this funny. Like you're always in the natural zone.
Oh, pardon me?
It's about you. I'm talking about you when I said having opinions is okay.
Oh, having an opinion is okay. All right. Yeah, I thought you were talking about the argument. Sorry about that. I misunderstood. All right. I shall leave you guys alone.
The conclusion was not match the premise, so yeah.
Can you still hear me? My headphones died.
Yeah, we
I can hear you perfectly.
Okay, great.
How can you hear us?
Yeah, now. Okay, now it's fine. Thank you.
Okay, let's take a look at some of the premises in this argument. Are they reliable or not?
we said it's not reliable.
Okay, which ones? Because there are multiple premises here.
For instance, the thing about ESP and that one of the professor in Duke University actually mentioned it. For me, it was just, I guess, one opinion from just one university professor, and if like a lot of professors and there are a lot of reports about it, it could have been reliable, but I guess it's not. It's just opinion from one university professor.
Okay. You'll notice that the first premises is that ghosts are real.
Right.
That's a very unreliable premises because
it's a statement, I guess.
Yeah, it's a statement of fact. Remember at the beginning of my presentation, I said there has to be not only a clear distinction between the conclusion and the premises, but they have to be reliable. In this case, one of the main premises is that ghosts are real. If ghosts are not real, then the rest of the argument collapses. You have to believe that ghosts are real. But as a scientific fact, that hasn't been proven yet. Actually, I think ESP has not been proven yet. So if 50%, what's it, 50% of the population has an ability that is not scientifically proven, they can see something which is also not scientifically proven to exist. Yeah, these are fairly unreliable premises. And what was it? Oh, and Seijin, you mentioned about the professor, right? In the next week, we're going to be looking at what's called arguments from authority. When you want to back up one of your claims, you want to get an expert in the field, you know, according to this person. Now, some people are impressed when a professor says something, but there's something very unreliable about this professor. I'm going to ask Seunghyun if you know what that is. There's something that's very striking about this professor.
Not really sure.
Okay, let's look at what it says here. Despite what skeptics would have you believe, oh, by the way, this is an example of loaded language, which is something that is actually bad. You shouldn't do this. It's a very cheap trick. Despite what skeptics would have you believe, many people are capable of seeing ghosts. Ghosts are real, and anyone with a psychic ability known as ESP is capable of seeing them. ESP is a real phenomenon, according to Professor Joseph Ryan of Duke University. In fact, about half of all people have ESP, although many never realize it. What does Professor Joseph Ryan teach?
Well, there's no major. So
There's no major, yeah. What does he teach literature? Does he teach engineering? Does he teach media? Is there a major in paranormal science in this university? I don't know. You'll find the same kind of argument used when people use the word doctor. And they'll say, according to this doctor, UFOs exist, for example, or aliens exist. Just because somebody is a doctor or professor does not necessarily mean they are an expert at all things. It means they have specialist knowledge in a very narrow range of things. So just because someone is a doctor or professor doesn't mean that they necessarily are an authority on something else. I think ESP would be kind of cruel if it was real. I haven't seen any ghosts yet, but we shall see. Okay. Anyway, but it would be kind of interesting to check out haunted houses. Oh, while I do have you here, before I go back to the main screen, a random thought that just came into my mind. Has anyone here ever heard of the Amityville Horror?
No, I don't think so.
Amityville, okay. The Amityville Horror was a haunted house in the United States. It was very, very famous. There was a movie made about it. There was a couple that claimed their house was haunted. You know, doors would slam, the fridge would fall over, and they found like in the snow outside their window, they saw like something that looked like it had horns outside the window with red glowing eyes, and it left like hoof prints in the snow, all of this kind of stuff. And it was probably one of the most well-known cases of a haunted house in the United States in the 1970s. Somebody wrote a book about it, and for many years afterwards, people would always think of that haunted house. However, a number of years after the after the movie was made and everything, their lawyer came out and said, actually, we made it all up. The family had some big debts, and they could not afford to pay for the house. And they were trying to think of some way, and apparently they drank a lot of wine, and they came up with the idea of a haunted house. And they thought maybe they could write a book and make money, and it did. It became a bestseller, but it's not based on fact. And some reporters, they actually investigated the house, and they said, oh, you said, you know, there was some, you know, devil or something outside the house with red glowing eyes, and there was the hoof prints in the snow, but there was no snow in that city that year. So yeah, check it out. I'll let you know the spelling. It's quite an interesting case where many years after the truth came out, millions of people still continued to believe the story.
That's interesting.
Including my mother, by the way.
Oh no.
Okay, moving on. So let's go back to the main screen. All right. So talking about ghosts, I'm gonna ask your NER. Okay, what did you and your partners come up with? What are the premises, and are they reliable or not?
So our conclusion was the first sentence. and other sentences was premises. However, they are not reliable at all because it's talking about ghost. And there only one premise that we thought can be reliable. It is that ECP is a real phenomenon, according to Professor Joseph Ryan of Duke University. It only says that ECP is a real phenomenon. It doesn't say that ECP can help you to talk to ghosts, to see ghosts. So we think this only one's that reliable premise.
Okay, as I read it, ESP is described as an ability to see ghosts.
Yes, to see ghosts.
Yeah. However, is ESP a scientific fact?
I think it's talking about phenomenon. It's just like a health issue is ESP.
Okay. Is that common knowledge, or would you need a very strong piece of evidence to support that?
That it is a real phenomenon?
Because I personally, if somebody tells me that ESP is real, I will say, can you please give me some proof? Can you please give me a source?
Yeah. I think there should be health like documentaries or research about this.
And actually, you mentioned the professor. This is something which I discussed with another group. Joseph Ryan is his name. What does he teach? What is his specialty? Or his specialization?
We don't know about it.
They don't talk about it. He might teach literature. He might teach fashion design. He might teach anything. This is something we're going to look at a little bit later in the course. It's something called the argument from authority. When you want to support a claim or back up a premise, it's a good idea to get some experts to support what you are trying to prove. However, the expert should be an expert in a particular field. Now, for example, if you want to know about any particular field, you want to have somebody that has specialist knowledge in that opinion. For example, if I want to know about some political analysis, maybe something, there's a world issue, I might ask a professor of international relations. A medical doctor, although they are a specialist in medicine, does not necessarily have specialist knowledge about something else. So be very careful when experts are quoted, because experts are not always experts in everything. They're usually experts in a very specific field. And that's something we'll be looking at a little bit later. Okay, and I'm sorry for taking you a little bit over time. For homework, all I would like you to do is please complete exercise or activity number 2. And that is a short argument about how PowerPoint slides and PowerPoint presentations are destroying education. The first one is done for you. Number 1 is done for you. After that, try to put the argument in the correct order by putting a little number beside each one. And we'll take a look at that at the beginning of our next class. Okay, so have a very good weekend, and I'll see everybody on Zoom next Tuesday. Okay, bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Professor.
Amen.